Okay, so the Leviathan raid came out last week, and I unfortunately only started it yesterday because I was a bit slow to get gear. So it's the first raid, obviously, of Destiny 2. Bungie and the player base are kind of hoping it kind of kicks the game off with a bit of a bang. Came out a week after release or so, a couple weeks after release. So I'm going to be going through it, giving you my thoughts on it, and a final score at the end, what I liked about each encounter, what I didn't. And yeah, so the raid starts off with a big courtyard encounter. Essentially, there's one big courtyard, and all the fights. There's a door for each encounter. You have to do an activity at each door. So you have to go and grab flags, bring them back to a plate, and defend those flags. Then once you do that 3 times, each door, the door you've just planted flags, that will open, and you can go into the encounter. From what I've been told each week, the order that you have to do this in, the order that you have to do the encounters in will change. Except the final boss, Kalis, he will always be last. This week it was the garden fight, which I'm going to be going on to first. It was the garden fight, then it was the bath fight, then it was the gauntlet fight, then it was the final boss, Kalis. So the gardens, it's a very weird fight. The gardens, you have to dodge angry dogs and activate magic damage multiplying flowers or some shit like that to kill the angry dogs I was talking about. This fight is just fucking bullshit in general. The dogs do random shit like run into your safe room. Oh, it will sometimes even detect you when you're standing behind rocks. Complete fucking bullshit. The gardens, yeah, it's not a fight I'm particularly fond of. It's just there's so much that can go wrong with it. And when you, in theory, the fight is actually not hard. But honestly, sometimes alright, the vast majority of the time my team wiped, it wasn't because we fucked up. It was because the fight screwed us over, and dogs did things like detecting players behind rocks, dogs running into the safe room, dogs just going down different patrol patterns to what they're meant to be going down, and the dogs stopping for not normal amount of time, completely messing with your movement patterns, which makes the fight quite a frustrating fight and not enjoyable at all, really. I hated the fight. It was just a mess. I spent 2.5 hours wiping on it on day 1, then another hour and a half wiping on it day 2. Then my group eventually cleared it after about 4 hours and 30 or so wipes. Yeah, the fight there's so much that can go wrong, and there's so much that can go wrong, and so much that can go wrong isn't the player's fault. And things happen that kind of just screw the fight over, and it makes it quite a frustrating fight, and you really don't want to be there. You want to just do everything you can to skip it. So yeah, it's unfortunately this week not a great start to the raid, especially if it's your first time. I was a bit like, what the fuck, if this is the standard for the fights, I ain't doing this shit, I'll go play something else. But no, it does get better after that. Pretty much this week the fights have ended up going from worst to best, in my opinion. So you start with Gardens, which I'm just going to tell you right now is the worst fight in the raid. It's probably, it took the longest amount of time, but I don't actually think it's the hardest fight. I think it's just the fight with the most amount of bullshit in it. So the next fight is, so you go back to the courtyard, you do another encounter at the entrance to the bathhouse. The bathhouse is a fight where you stand on 4 platforms, but those platforms are slightly underwater. You need to pick up a buff that allows you to not take damage from water for 50 seconds. Then a player needs to come swap with you. You go get that buff again, and so on and so on and so on. It's not an unfair fight. It's a perfectly doable fight. It's probably the easiest. In fact, yeah, it is the easiest fight in the raid. It's not that interesting. I mean, it's essentially stand on platform, swap with teammate, swap back with another teammate, do that until you can then go into the middle, shoot the... So what you got to kill once you get to the middle of the encounter is some purple canisters that are hanging from the ceiling in the middle room. You got to shoot those. You shoot those, and then once you've killed all 3 sets of canisters, which you should probably be aiming to do in 2 phases, you're done. It's a fine fight. It's a decent encounter. It's a good filler fight. I don't have anything against it. It was a wee bit boring and a bit repetitive. And I know all the fights in the raid are repetitive because it's essentially do a phase, then do that phase again. It's like most of the fights in the raid seem to follow a general: do a phase, damage boss, do another phase, damage boss, do another phase, kill boss, or kill boss in any one of the end of those phases, something like that. Baths does this just like all the fights, but it's not really an edgy or seat fight, and it's not really that hard of an encounter, but it's a decent filler encounter, not bad. It only took my group about half an hour, and we only wiped 3 times on it, and that was just getting the rotations down. Once we got the rotations down, really, you can't do a whole lot wrong. And then on to the next fight, and this is where things start to get really awesome. The gauntlet fight is essentially it's essentially a fight where 2 players get to have tons of fun, and the rest of the raid fucking hates it. So 2 players are chosen, and 2 players have to run the gauntlet. The gauntlet is a big circle around the edge of the map. They pick up this little scion charge thing, and they have to run around going through obstacles. They get to gates, and depending on what holes in said gate are lit up, they have to tell their teammates on the outside what arrows to shoot. So that's pretty much the grand total of the fight. Once you get to the end of the gauntlet, you take your orb to the middle of the encounter, and then you go back and run the gauntlet again. Take the orb to the middle, then you go back to the gauntlet again. Once you've done the gauntlet 3 times, then the entire raid team have the chance to go into the gauntlet. Then the entire raid team need to run the gauntlet. All 6 of you are inside the gauntlet. Only 4 of you need to make it to the end, but this is actually probably the best part of the fight. It's also the most frustrating part when you just see that final finish line in sight, and then with 4 players alive, 2 players have already died, and then someone falls on the hole, and you're like, oh fuck. Because the fight, it's not long. It probably takes about 6-7 minutes, probably 8 minutes to get from the start of the fight to the final gauntlet where all the entire fire team are running it. It's a wee bit of a frustrating fight. The fight overall probably only took about 8 hours, not 8 hours, 8 wipes over the space of an hour, so it wasn't that bad, and it was a really fun fight, and personally my favourite encounter in the raid, just because it's a very unique fight. I'm kind of like the dogs is a very unique fight as well, but the dogs just fucking bullshit. This is a really unique fight, and it's a lot of fun, and even though the players outside don't get to have as much fun as the gauntlet, they still got a very important on the edge of their seat job to do. So like I said, it's repetitive like all the other fights. You do a phase, but there's not really a boss to shoot in this phase. You do the phase, drop orbs off, do the phase, drop orbs off, do the phase, drop orbs off, then you've got the final phase where everyone's going around. So like I said, 1 hour to complete, 8 wipes probably, and 5 of those wipes were just us trying to figure out how we were going to deal with the ads at the start, because the ads are quite overwhelming, and certain players in our raid team needed a bit more help than others because of the gear, requirements. Then we're on to the final boss fight, Kalis. Kalis he's a very difficult fight, but by far the hardest fight in the raid. But this is great. This is what a final boss should be, right? The final boss should always be the hardest fight, in my opinion. It's like you've been working towards, you're up to this big climatic final boss fight, then you kill him and he's really easy. And it's like, oh, he's the final boss, really? That's it? So he should be a hard fight. 3 players have to grab orbs So essentially, at the start of the fight, a bunch of ads spawn, then the entire team gets teleported to this weird space dimension. 3 players are able to return, and 3 players have to stay. The 3 players that stay are grabbing skulls from these weird, evil ghost head things, while those evil ghost heads try and eat them, and the 3 other players are breaking scions in the throne room, in the order called out by the space dimension players based on the info they receive while they're there. So that's a wee bit complicated. 4 scions spawn in the room, but only 3 icons appear in... So let me start again. 3 scions appear in the throne room, each with a symbol above their head. The players in the space dimension each will see their own icon. So 3 players each see a different icon. So that's 3 icons. Those icons match up with icons in the throne room, but then there's 1 icon left over that isn't seen. The team in the throne room have to kill that scion. If they kill the scion whose icon does not appear in the space dimension. And this is where it gets a wee bit complicated, because they've got to figure out which scion they have and haven't seen. Then once you do this 3 or 4 times, I think once you kill 3 or 4 of the scions, you then you get a chance to break Kalis, the final boss's shield, and then you get the chance to damage him. You do this And some raid groups are getting really close to being able to do this in one phase. My raid group took 2, we just got them on the end of the second phase. Some raid groups will take 3. If a raid group's taking 4, they're probably going to wipe, because then it won't be good enough to deal with the ads. But this fight is just incredibly hard, because there's so many ways you can wipe. If the Dimension players fall off platforms, they wipe. The Throne Room players hit the wrong Scion, you wipe. If the Dimension players call out the wrong Scion, you wipe. If the Throne Room players don't kill Kalos' shield fast enough, they wipe. If they don't kill ads fast enough, they wipe. If all the Throne Room players die, you wipe. If you mistime your jumps on damage platforms, you're gonna wipe. So there's so many different ways you can wipe in that fight, and it was a great fight. It took my group 3 hours and about 20 wipes to get through. But it's such a fun fight, and it's such a cool, edge of your seat fight. Like, I didn't really feel bored. Like, the 4 hours I spent in the gardens trying to do the dogs, I just hated that. But the 3 hours I spent trying to kill Kalos went really quickly, and I really, really enjoyed it. So overall, I was really satisfied with Leviathan. Actually, I'm relatively happy with all the fights, except gardens, of course. That shit can just fuck off and die. But most of the fights are edge of your seat encounters, fair difficulty, except the last one, which is hard, but that's what a final boss should be, in my opinion. Final boss should always be really hard and a big challenge, and it should be kind of almost a status symbol in the game when you have loot from the final boss. It's like sets you above other players. It took me about 9.5 hours to clear the entire thing over 2 days. Probably put like 2-3 hours on the first day, then the rest of it today. So yeah, 2.5 hours 9.5 hours all up to clear Leviathan. Once I included the courtyard fights that you have to do between the encounters, they each take about 15 minutes or so. Overall, I'll give Leviathan an 8 out of 10. What unfortunately did hold it back from the 10 out of 10 was the most bullshitty shit raid encounter I think I've ever done. The dog fight, and not a bad fight, but just a relatively stale and kind of uninteresting bass fight. But the gauntlet and the final boss is just amazing. Kalos, it makes the raid really memorable, and I think it's the start that Bungie should have been looking for. And I think it's a great start for Destiny 2, and hopefully it keeps the player base here. So that is it for me, guys. Next time Destiny releases a raid, I'd hope that would be within the next 3 or 4 months. I'll be doing another review on that. Hopefully we'll be getting some more Destiny 2 videos up in the not too dim and distant future. But until then, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.